Chapter 47. As soon as the Admiral left, after telling them about the imminent eruption of the volcano at Yellowstone National Park and the existence of the alien island off the coast of Florida, Jason and Dennis dove into finding out why the aliens had died. Diana wasn't about to allow the opportunity to see real-live aliens up close and personal go by. She was on their heels as her two stars headed down to the portal room, where they immediately got to work. While Dennis fired up the cryogenics plant and got the power generation system online, Jason plugged in the USB drive containing information about the island. Diana didn't really have to do anything, but made sure if the guys needed anything, she would be their gopher. The USB stick had a considerable amount of reading material that needed to be reviewed at some point, but Jason immediately found a file with a GIS extension containing the Geographical Information System data needed to locate the island. After opening the file with his custom software, a globe appeared on the screen. As soon as Jason selected the file, the globe rotated to a location where the island was located. 26 degrees, 22 minutes, 9.4 seconds north, 70 degrees, 50 minutes, 7 seconds west. According to the topographical map information that came with the file, the ocean depth was approximately 1,737 meters below sea level in an area of the ocean floor called Hatteras Abyssal Plain. The globe on the screen settled on the proper location, allowing Jason to enter an elevation. To be safe, he entered an altitude of 1,000 meters, so they could get the lay of the land from high above before starting to drill down to points closer to sea level. I have the coordinates entered, but what date should we shoot for? I don't exactly remember Admiral Rotten Tomatoes mentioning exactly when they supposedly died, asked Jason. The colloquial name he gave the Admiral earned a few chuckles from his friends. Dennis replied, "Perhaps we should start off with today's date. Let's see what we're working with, then go back in time with a better idea of what and when we're looking for." "Good idea, bud." Jason entered it and pressed the commit button. As soon as he did, a set of predetermined operations began. Like Cape Canaveral launching a rocket, a countdown showed on the screen of Jason's and Dennis's consoles. The countdown synchronized several operations that had to take place in proper order. When the cryogenics plants released the liquid helium into the superconductor conduits, when the four major banks of relays kicked into place, and when the time and place parameters shaped the control surfaces in the portal chamber, allowing a specific time and place to be displayed. The software controlling all this was the primary thing Jason and Dennis had been working on in the last several weeks. Diana was rather impressed with how smoothly things worked this time versus the last time she saw the portal in operation. When the countdown neared the 0 mark, the last set of relays closed, and the final power was rendered to the portal system, allowing the portal field to form. Once completely formed, it showed something they hadn't exactly expected: a living room. This wasn't your typical living room, though. In a word, it was beautiful, comfortable, contemporary, romantic, breezy, modern, yet classic. In the foreground was what looked like a computer terminal with a screen, but no keyboard. To the side of the screen was what appeared to be a holster that could hold something relatively small, like a computer mouse. The floor looked like it was made of multicolored blue marble. In various places there were pots of blooming flowers, and off to the left was a couch and coffee table which was perched on top of a fluffy area rug. The living room was perched high up in the air, perhaps in some high-rise building's apartment. In front of the open doorways on all sides of the room were gauze-like curtains lightly wafting back and forth in the gentle breeze. Pillows of various shapes and colors were on the couch. A spiral staircase in the far end of the room contained a tree growing up from the floor. surrounded by several well-arranged plants. For a few moments, the three just stared at the scene in front of them. They weren't expecting to see anything like this when they connected. "What altitude did you enter for this connection?" asked Dennis. 1,000 meters, answered Jason. "Nah, that can't be right. Check your numbers again." "Already did. This is 1,000 meters, all right. This is a stinkin' tall building." The three continued to examine all the features of the room. Only now did it appear to have something that didn't quite fit the decor. Off to the left, near the couch, was what looked like a backpack. In any other living room, this wouldn't be out of place. But since the decor and height of the room were not man-made, the backpack seemed a little odd. Jason leaned forward near the portal to get a better look. That is when all three were jolted back in their seats. Coming in from the left was a woman, obviously not aware she was being watched. She was wearing a beautiful dress, and as she walked, they could see she was rather tall, with an attractive tangle of red hair reaching just past the middle of her back. She walked over to the couch and sat down, allowing all three in the portal room to see her fair skin and beautiful green eyes. She started rifling through that same backpack Jason had been looking at earlier. Almost forgetting that the speakers were hooked up to the portal, the three voyeurs suddenly heard her ask, "Hey, Lynn, did you see my hairspray?" Away from the view of the portal, another woman's voice could be heard in reply. "Yeah, I saw it earlier in the other bathroom." "Oh, that's right. I left it in there earlier." Jason looked over to his companions, who were just as amazed at what they were seeing. Before reaching over to his console to change the coordinates of the portal from 1,000 meters to something even higher, he decided to double the value, to 2,000 meters. The portal field went hazy for a while, then refocused to a scene considerably higher above the surface of the ocean. The novelty of what they had seen earlier wasn't outdone by the new vista, but this new scene was equally an enigma. After a few seconds, they realized they were seeing a large portion of the island itself. Jason thought its description should be left to poets, since the words beautiful, elegant, gorgeous, stunning, and attractive somehow just didn't cut it. The overall shape of the island was centered around an area where dozens of enormous buildings were located, all gleaming and amazing to behold in their own right. Stemming out from the central section were 6 peninsulas. Each was immaculately maintained, and all appeared to support a tropical garden paradise. On the far end of each peninsula was what looked like an arch or pylon, standing in guardianship over the central part of the island. They arched toward the middle, and had terraces fashioned in their sides supporting trees and plants. Each must have been at least 1,500 meters tall. This time it was Diana who spoke. "OMG! It's beautiful," said Jason. The three stared in amazement for almost 10 minutes. Sporadically, each of them would take turns pointing out features here or there they had only just discovered from so high a vantage point. The fact that they were currently looking at the island from over a mile up in the sky was certainly not lost on them. It was, in a word, incredible. The reality of why they were looking at this island finally intruded on their consciousness, and Jason was the first one to corral the thoughts of his colleagues back to the task at hand. "As much as I would love to continue looking at this, I don't think we're going to save the world this way," said Jason. "You're right, but one thing's for sure," said Dennis. "If we do save the world, I'm moving here." "Count me in on that one," added Diana. Nodding in acknowledgement, Jason said, "Okay, let's get back down to ground level and get a good look at the lay of the land." "Wait a minute," said Dennis. Didn't Admiral Dorcas Membranus say all the aliens were dead? That redhead didn't look too unhealthy. Scowling, Jason let out a but it was Diana who said, "She wasn't an alien." "What makes you say that?" asked Dennis. "Well, for one thing, I'm certain those aliens don't shop at Small Mart. I saw that backpack there when I was shopping for one for my son. I think she might be one of the Admiral's yes-women." "Wow," acknowledged Dennis. "That's some pretty stout deductive reasoning there, Sherlock." Diana looked at Dennis and, without a word, rendered a toothy smile. Jason, only half listening to Dennis and Diana, typed new coordinates into the portal control software. He had decided on relocating to a park-like setting on the surface of the island. The new version of the software was able to not only pinpoint a specific location and time, but also alter the portal's control surfaces so they could change the 360 by 360 degree direction it was facing. That particular feature made it easy to locate to the park, then face toward a large walkway, large enough to support quite a crowd walking along. It also showed a nice bench situated in the middle of the park. As soon as he entered the coordinates, the portal changed back into a pale blue haze. Within a few seconds, the scene transformed into a gorgeous park-like setting. Or at least half of it. The altitude setting was about 1.5 meters too low, so the lower half of the portal was nothing but dirt. There was a grass line stretching from the 9 o'clock position to the 3 o'clock position on the circular portal aperture. "Oops," called out Jason with a half laugh. Both Jason and Diana chuckled. Jason's trained hands glided over the keyboard, and within seconds, the portal realigned itself and the entire opening showed a complete vista of flora. The well-manicured setting was impressive. "If they're supposed to be all dead, how's this park so well maintained?" asked Dennis. "You got me," answered Jason. The breeze coming in from the nearby ocean, lazily moving the trees back and forth, the light orange, violet, and pink light coming from the late afternoon skies to the west, and the sound of birds rounded out the serene scene. "Bringing up the time scroller subroutines. Setting time advance quotient to T-1000, said Jason. As soon as he entered the parameters and pressed the commit button, the scene seemed to freeze for a moment, then resumed movement. "It froze for a second. Was that a glitch?" asked Diana. "Not exactly," said Jason. "What I just did was bring up a subroutine which allowed me to tell the portal control software that the specific time point I want doesn't need to proceed forward in time. Instead, it progressively resets the time point back in time by 1 second every second. In other words, each second we move forward in time, the portal is reset back in time by 1,000 milliseconds, or 1 second. For that split second, the portal replays the same second for more than 1 second. If you watch things long enough, you'll notice the late afternoon sunlight begin to get lighter and lighter as we go back farther in time. Eventually, we will be replaying. Just then, Jason's point was made obvious by a person dressed in a military uniform walking past the viewpoint of the portal. Backwards. "That certainly makes your point," said Diana. "Sure does," said Dennis, "but we're going to need to step it up a bit." Deciding to gradually increase the speed of the backward march in time, Jason said, "Setting time advance quotient to T-minus 3.6 megs. "What does that mean?" asked Diana. "The number he's entering in is multiples of milliseconds, or thousandths of a second," answered Dennis. "He's selecting 3.6 million milliseconds, or 1 hour, as the new backward step speed." Sure enough, as soon as the time scroller subroutine accepted the new parameter, Each second that went by for the three standing in the portal room saw the portal go back in time 1 hour. As they looked at the sky, they saw the sun, then the moon, make their way across repeatedly. Slowly but surely, the portal was systematically going back in time. "This is still too slow," said Jason. "Resetting to T-minus 86.4 megs," said Jason. Looking at Diana, he explained, 1 day per step. Suddenly, the sun stopped its east-west movement across the sky and started a north-south movement. "Why is the sun moving that way?" asked Diana. Figuring it out for herself, she said, "Oh, I get it. We're looking at the same time of the day every day, but now we're seeing the movement of the Earth in its travels around the sun." "Precisely," said Jason. "At this speed, we're already looking at things a month or two ago." "Freeze!" shouted Dennis. Immediately, Jason smacked the spacebar on his console, and the scene froze, as if he had hit the pause button on a DVD player. "What is it, pal? Did you see something?" asked Jason. "I think so," responded Dennis. "Unless I was seeing things, I'm sure I saw that redhead sitting on the bench over there. Go forward 1 day at a time, but stop at each day. It shouldn't be many days until she is sitting there." Jason altered the scroller subroutine to T plus 86.4 megs and turned off auto progress. "Starting now," he said. The portal showed the scene 1 day forward in the future. The scene was unremarkable, so Jason repeatedly pressed the spacebar, allowing the portal to show the next day. With a chuckle in his voice, Jason said, "Buddy, I think you might have been seeing Right then, the scene was exactly as before, but sitting on the bench was the red-headed woman they had seen before in the sky-high apartment. "Is she crying?" asked Diana. "Actually, I think wailing is the correct word for it," said Dennis. For reasons not readily apparent, the red-headed woman was sitting on the bench crying her eyes out. She wailed at the top of her lungs, apparently to nobody. She was inconsolable, not that there was anybody there who could console her. The sadness evident in her was infectious. The longer they watched her repeatedly cycle between episodes of uncontrollable wails to periods of muted sobs, the more they descended into their own sets of sympathy pain. Thankfully, Jason pressed the spacebar once again, and she suddenly vanished. All that could be heard were the sounds of nature. It took a few moments for anybody to speak, and even then all Diana could say was, "Wow." Jason and Dennis simultaneously breathed deep, and Jason said, "That was intense. If I had seen that in the movie theaters, I would have personally given her an Oscar right then and there." "Yeah," said Dennis, "but this isn't a movie. This is real. She was obviously distraught about something. I'd like to find out what that was." "Me too," said Jason, "but that won't save the world. I'm going to save the coordinates for later. Once we clear things up, we can always come back to her. She's not going anywhere." Begrudgingly, Dennis agreed. "You're right, but I don't like it." "I know," acknowledged Jason. "We have a few billion people to save first. We'll come back." He hit a few keystrokes, allowing the control software to save the time and location coordinates for use later, then proceeded on. This time, however, he changed the time signatures so he could move back 1 year at a time. He figured he could go back relatively fast this way, and when he started seeing life on the island, he would slow things down. It took some time, but eventually the portal came to a point where there appeared to be people walking around in the park, enjoying the walkways and each other's company. After slowing down the backward motion of the portal, Jason paused the scene on a place where they could clearly see what the aliens looked like. They should have become used to this, but once again, they were speechless. Right there in front of them were beings who were not human, who had presumably not been born on this planet. They were statuesque and seemed at least 2.5 meters tall. They looked similar to humans in that they had 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head containing 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, etc. And yet, other than the height, there was something different about them. From this vantage point, it was difficult to make out a lot of details. Once they got over the initial shock of seeing real, live alien life forms for the first time, they began systematically traveling around the island trying to figure out what happened. Listening to their spoken language, the 3 quickly figured out they had no idea what was being said. They came to a point where they could see some starting to appear sick. Within a few days, they all seemed to disappear. It actually took about 3 days for Jason, Dennis, and Diana to narrow down the events of what triggered the start of the sickness. At one point, a human made it to the island in a tiny rowboat. Listening to the soundtrack of the event, they could hear this person speaking Spanish. Jason's Spanish was a little rusty, but it sounded like he was speaking the kind spoken in Spain. The only thing they discovered was his name, José Barragán y Cisneros. Beyond that, they didn't understand much. It took another day of them following him around to see he was sick. Very sick, in fact. Going back and forth over the timeline confirmed that before this guy from Spain landed, everybody seemed to be doing just fine. After his arrival, they seemed to die off until, about 4 weeks later, none were left. They figured he must have brought with him some disease that infected everybody on the island, eventually killing them.
"That guy must be the key to what happened to the aliens," said Diana. "What I don't understand is why, with all the advanced technology we've seen here, didn't they have the ability to fight off a bug like this? It's almost like we're watching a real-life case of War of the Worlds from H.G. Wells."
"Huh," said Dennis. "I hadn't thought about it like that, but you're exactly right. They seem to be a pretty advanced civilization, yet this seems to be a pretty fundamental thing they missed." "The fundamental truth we now have sitting in our laps," said Jason, "is this guy was really sick with some kind of contagious disease, one we don't have the training to identify, and it's what killed them." There was a lull in the conversation for a few moments. "We need to get a doctor to diagnose what's wrong with this guy. Then," Jason paused, "we need to give him and them the medicine they need to keep from dying." The proverbial lead balloon cut a swath through the portal room. Once the suggestion was made, the die seemed to have been cast. Diana and Dennis sat in slack-jawed silence, looking straight at Jason. Stunned would best describe the two. "Do you realize what you're suggesting?" asked Dennis. Staring down at the floor, Jason answered his friend without looking at him. "I do, pal. But if I do it right, I can go there, fix the problem, then come back." "You do realize, don't you, this is going to let the cat out of the bag?" asked Dennis. "The revelation that this portal allows not only time viewing, but also time traveling, is going to put a very big gun in the hands of a certain admiral." Jason shrugged and said, "I'm really open to alternative suggestions." Diana and Dennis continued looking at Jason for a very long minute, then at each other, then at nothing in particular. Staring off into the distance, Diana said, "If we're going to do this, then we need the best diagnosis we can get. If this race of beings really is the key to the continued lives of every man, woman, and child on the planet, then whatever doctor we consult had better get it right." Without a word, Jason and Dennis nodded their heads and unanimously agreed. Diana reached over and dialed the number to the Pentagon. Hey, fellow Galimarians, this is Dan Adrian, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my book. If you can, please click like down below because it really helps me bring these videos to you and lets me know what you like. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click on the bell so that you'll get notified when I release more chapters. If you have any questions about this or any other of my books, or if you want to know more about what it takes to write a novel like this one, please make sure you leave your question in the comments below. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.